Before we begin this incredible story, please subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so you never miss another amazing true story like this one. Now let's begin. The morning of October 12th, 2024. Started like any other day for 8-year-old Princess Charlotte. She woke up in Kensington Palace, had breakfast with her brothers George and Louis, prepared for what was supposed to be a routine school visit to a children's hospital in East London. It was part of her introduction to royal duties, carefully planned by her parents. Prince William and Princess Catherine. Charlotte was nervous but excited. She had been practicing her handshake with her mother all week, learning how to greet people properly, how to smile even when she felt shy, and how to ask questions that showed genuine interest. Catherine had told her that being royal wasn't about being perfect, it was about making people feel valued and seen. The security detail assigned to Charlotte that day was led by Officer David Chen, a 30-year-old royal protection officer who had served the royal family for 12 years. David was experienced, thorough, and absolutely dedicated to his work. He had protected various members of the royal family during countless public events, and nothing had ever gone wrong on his watch. David wore a standard suit rather than the ceremonial red uniform, as this was a protection detail rather than a ceremonial duty. But standing among the security team was Guardsman Marcus Webb, 29 years old, who had been specially assigned to provide additional visible security presence. Marcus wore his full-dress uniform, the iconic red tunic, and bearskin hat that tourists love to photograph. His presence was meant to be reassuring, traditional, symbol of royal continuity. Marcus was relatively new to royal protection duties. Having spent most of his military career in active combat zones, he had served 2 tours in the Middle East and had earned commendations for bravery under fire. But this was different. This was about protecting a child during what should be a safe, controlled public appearance. The hospital visit was scheduled to last 90 minutes. Charlotte would tour the children's ward, meet young patients, deliver some gifts, and pose for a few official photographs. Standard procedure. Low risk. Everything had been checked and rechecked by the security team. Charlotte climbed into the royal car with her private secretary, Emma Richardson, a kind woman in her 50s who had been helping Charlotte prepare for public duties. Catherine had wanted to come along, but she was recovering from a minor illness and had reluctantly stayed behind. William was abroad on an official tour. Charlotte would represent the family alone for the first time. "Remember, darling," Emma said gently as they drove through London, "just be yourself. The children will love meeting you, and you'll do wonderfully." Charlotte nodded, clutching a small bag of gifts she had personally selected for the patients' books, puzzles, and hand-drawn cards. She had spent hours making those cards, wanting each child to have something special. The hospital had been preparing for weeks. The children's ward had been decorated with bunting and flowers. Young patients who were well enough had been brought to a common area where they would meet the princess. Medical staff lined the corridors, excited to see a real princess in their workplace. Outside, a crowd had gathered: parents, local residents, royal watchers with their cameras ready. Barriers had been set up to keep the crowd at a safe distance. Police officers from the Metropolitan Police stood at regular intervals. Everything appeared normal, controlled, safe. David Chen surveyed the scene with his trained eye as their car pulled up. He spoke quietly into his radio, confirming positions with other security personnel. "Eagle has arrived," he said, using Charlotte's codename. "Proceeding to entry point." Marcus Webb stood near the hospital entrance, his red uniform bright in the autumn morning light. He scanned the crowd constantly, looking for anything unusual, anything that didn't fit the pattern. It was a habit from combat, always watching, always ready. Charlotte stepped out of the car, and the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. She smiled shyly and waved, just as her mother had taught her. She looked so small standing there, a little girl in a navy coat and matching hat, trying to be brave in front of hundreds of strangers. Emma took Charlotte's hand and guided her toward the entrance. David Chen walked ahead, his eyes constantly moving. Marcus fell into step beside them, his tall frame and ceremonial uniform creating an imposing presence. Inside the hospital, the atmosphere was warm and welcoming. The director greeted Charlotte formally, and then they began the tour. Charlotte met children in beds, children in wheelchairs, children with bandages and 4 lines. She was gentle with each one, asking their names, asking about their favorite subjects in school, showing them the gifts she had brought. One little boy, maybe 5 years old, asked if she was a real princess. Charlotte knelt down to his level and said, "Seriously, yes, I am. But I'm also just a girl, like you're just a boy. We're the same, really, except I have to wear fancy clothes sometimes." The boy giggled, and so did the adults watching. It was a perfect moment. Exactly the kind of genuine interaction that made royal visits meaningful. But Marcus Webb, standing near the doorway, felt something was wrong. He couldn't identify what exactly, just a prickling sensation at the back of his neck. The same feeling he used to get in combat zones seconds before something bad happened. His combat instincts were screaming at him, though everything appeared normal. He spoke quietly into his radio. "This is Webb. Anyone else feeling uneasy?" David Chen's voice came back immediately. "Negative. All clear." "Why?" "Just a feeling. Probably nothing." But it wasn't nothing. At that exact moment, 3 floors below in the hospital basement, a man named Richard Paxton was cutting through a chain link fence that separated the hospital's underground parking area from the public street. Richard was 42 years old, unemployed, and suffering from severe mental illness that he had stopped treating months ago. Richard believed that the royal family was part of a vast conspiracy against him personally. He had spent years posting increasingly disturbing messages on social media, claiming that Princess Charlotte specifically was sending him coded messages through television appearances. His delusions had grown more intense, more dangerous. And today, when he learned Charlotte would be at this hospital, he had decided to act. Security had screened everyone entering the hospital through official channels, but they hadn't anticipated someone breaking in through the maintenance tunnels that connected the basement to the street. Richard had researched the hospital's layout obsessively. He knew exactly where to enter, exactly how to avoid cameras, exactly where the princess would be. He carried a knife in his jacket pocket and a disturbing certainty that what he was about to do was right, necessary, ordained by forces only he could understand. Above ground, Charlotte continued her tour, unaware of the danger moving toward her through the hospital's lower levels. She was now in the common room, sitting in a circle with 6 children, reading them a story from one of the books she had brought. Her voice was clear and animated as she did different character voices. Making the children laugh, Marcus Webb had moved closer, still unable to shake the feeling that something was wrong. David Chen noticed his agitation and pulled him aside. "Marcus, you need to relax. You're making everyone nervous." "Something's off," Marcus insisted. "I can feel it. There's nothing off. Everything is secure. This is a controlled environment." But even as David spoke those words, an alarm began to sound in a distant part of the hospital. The alarm was distant enough that most people in the children's ward didn't immediately register it. Hospital alarms went off, occasionally fire drills, equipment malfunctions, minor emergencies. The staff glanced at each other with mild concern, but continued with their duties. Charlotte looked up from her story, her expression uncertain. "What's that sound?" she asked Emma. "It's just a hospital alarm, darling." "Nothing to worry about," Emma assured her, but she glanced at David Chen for confirmation. David was already on his radio, his voice low and urgent. "What's the status on that alarm? Anyone have information?" There was a pause, then a crackly response from hospital security. "Breach in the basement level. Maintenance door forced open. Investigating now." Ash. David's expression hardened instantly. His years of training kicked in, and he made a split-second assessment. Protocol said to maintain position unless there was a confirmed direct threat. The breach was 3 floors below them. It could be anything: a homeless person seeking shelter, teenagers exploring a malfunctioning door. But Marcus Webb's military instincts told a different story. Basement breach during a royal visit? That wasn't coincidence. That was deliberate. "We need to move her now," Marcus said firmly to David. "Negative. Protocol is to secure in place until we have confirmed threat assessment," David responded, following his training exactly. Screw protocol. Something's wrong. Marcus moved closer to Charlotte, his hand instinctively moving to his sidearm, which was concealed beneath his red tunic. David stepped in front of him. Stand down, Webb. You're not in charge here. We follow procedure. The two men locked eyes, one following the rules he had been trained to follow, the other trusting the combat instincts that had kept him alive in war zones. Meanwhile, 3 floors below, Richard Paxton had made it past the basement and was climbing the service stairs. He moved quickly but methodically, his mind completely convinced of his mission. Hospital security had been alerted to the breach, but they were searching the basement, not expecting an intruder to have already moved higher into the building. Richard knew the building layout. He knew that the children's ward was on the 3rd floor. He knew there would be security, but his delusion told him that he was invisible to them, that his mission was protected by higher powers. Back in the common room, Charlotte had returned to reading her story, but she kept glancing at the adults, sensing their tension. Children always knew when something was wrong, even when adults tried to hide it. David Chen made a decision. All right, we're going to wrap this up early. Nice and calm, no panic. Emma, start moving the princess toward the exit. We'll evacuate through the main entrance as planned. Emma nodded and gently touched Charlotte's shoulder. Sweetheart, I'm afraid we need to finish a bit early today. You've done wonderfully, but we have another appointment we need to get to. Charlotte looked disappointed but nodded obediently. She stood up, saying goodbye to the children she had been reading to. I'm sorry I can't finish the story, but you can keep the book and read the rest yourself. It has a very good ending. As they moved toward the door, Marcus positioned himself directly behind Charlotte, his eyes constantly scanning. Something still felt wrong. The alarm had stopped, but the feeling hadn't gone away. They were in the corridor now, moving toward the elevators. Hospital staff lined the walls, smiling and waving at Charlotte despite the underlying tension. The little princess waved back politely, maintaining her composure, even though she could sense something had changed. That's when Marcus heard a door slamming open in the stairwell, the echo of rapid footsteps. His combat training interpreted the sound instantly. Someone moving fast, with purpose, coming closer. Contact in the stairwell, Marcus shouted. Abandoning all pretense of calm, David Chen spun around just as Richard Paxton burst through the stairwell door into the corridor. 20 feet away from where Charlotte stood, Richard's eyes locked onto the little girl in the navy coat. His face twisted with the certainty of his delusion. You, he shouted. You're sending me messages. You're part of it. They told me to stop you. Time seemed to slow down. Hospital staff screamed and scattered. Emma instinctively grabbed Charlotte and pulled her backward. David Chen was already moving toward the threat, shouting into his radio for immediate backup. But Marcus Webb was faster. His combat experience had prepared him for exactly this moment, the split second where hesitation meant death, where thinking meant losing, where action was the only option. He didn't follow protocol. He didn't wait for authorization. He didn't secure the perimeter and wait for additional units. He did what every instinct in his body screamed at him to do. Marcus grabbed Charlotte, lifted her completely off the ground, and ran. Webb, stop. That's an order, David Chen shouted, but Marcus was already sprinting down the corridor in the opposite direction from the threat. Charlotte held tightly against his chest, his red tunic flying behind him. Behind them, David Chen and 2 other security officers tackled Richard Paxton as he lunged forward with his knife. There was a brief, violent struggle. Medical staff and patients watched in horror. The knife clattered to the floor. Richard was subdued, screaming incoherently about messages and conspiracies. But Marcus didn't see any of that. He was already around the corner, his long legs eating up the distance, his arms wrapped protectively around a terrified 8-year-old princess who had no idea what was happening. Hold on to me, Marcus said firmly to Charlotte. I've got you. You're safe. Charlotte wrapped her arms around his neck, her small body trembling. She didn't cry, her royal training held even in terror, but her breath came in short, frightened gasps. Marcus's mind was racing through options. The main elevators would be locked down. The main entrance would be secured but crowded with police responding to the alarm. He needed somewhere safe, somewhere defendable. Somewhere he could protect this child until the situation was completely under control. He kicked open a door, marked staff only, and found himself in a medical supply room. He set Charlotte down gently behind a large cabinet and positioned himself between her and the door, his hand on his sidearm. Charlotte asked, her voice small and frightened, all her royal composure finally cracking. "Where's Emma?" "Who was that man?" "I don't know who he was, but he can't hurt you now," Marcus said, his voice calm despite his racing heart. "My job is to keep you safe, and that's exactly what I'm doing." His radio was exploding with chatter. David Chen's voice, furious. "Webb, report your position immediately. You have directly violated orders." Other voices, threat neutralized. Subject in custody. "Where is Eagle? Has anyone got eyes on Eagle?" Marcus ignored them all for a moment, focusing on the frightened child in front of him. He knelt down to her level, making himself less intimidating despite his imposing uniform. "Princess Charlotte, I need you to listen to me carefully. The bad man has been stopped. You are completely safe. But I need to make sure before I take you out of this room. Can you be brave for just a few more minutes?" Charlotte nodded, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "My mummy says being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing what you need to do even when you are scared." Marcus smiled despite the situation. "Your mummy is very wise. You're being incredibly brave right now." Finally, Marcus reached for his radio. "This is Webb. I have Eagle. We are secure in a supply room on the 3rd floor, West Wing. Threat status." David Chen's voice came back immediately, still angry, but relieved. "Threat neutralized. Subject in custody. Return to main corridor immediately." "Negative," Marcus said firmly. "I need confirmation that all exits are secured and that no additional threats exist before I move the princess." "That is a direct order with respect, sir. I'm not moving her until I'm certain it's safe. She's my responsibility right now, and I'm keeping her here until I'm satisfied." There was a tense silence. Then a different voice came on the radio, someone from Scotland Yard. Higher authority. "Webb is correct. Maintain position until full sweep is complete." "Good work, guardsmen." Marcus looked at Charlotte, who was watching him with wide eyes. "See? We're doing exactly the right thing. Just a little bit longer, and then we'll get you back to your family." Charlotte nodded, then asked quietly, "Will you get in trouble for not following the order?" Marcus paused. Would he get in trouble? Absolutely. He had directly defied his superior officer, had broken protocol, had made an independent decision in a situation where chain of command was supposed to be absolute. But looking at this frightened little girl, safe behind a supply cabinet instead of in a corridor with a knife-wielding attacker, he knew he had made the right choice. Maybe he admitted honestly. But keeping you safe is more important than following rules. Your mummy and daddy would want someone to protect you no matter what. Charlotte considered this, then reached out and took Marcus's hand. "Thank you for being brave for me." 20 minutes later, after the hospital had been swept room by room and declared completely secure, Marcus finally emerged from the supply room with Charlotte. She still held his hand tightly, willing to let go of the person who had protected her. The corridor was now filled with police officers, security personnel, and hospital administrators. Emma Richardson rushed forward immediately, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, Charlotte. Thank God you're all right." Charlotte released Marcus's hand and ran to Emma, who swept her into a tight embrace. The little princess finally allowed herself to cry properly, all the fear and confusion pouring out in sobs against Emma's shoulder. David Chen approached Marcus. His expression conflicted, relieved, angry, and something else Marcus couldn't quite identify. "We need to talk. Now. Is the princess safe?" Marcus asked, not moving. "Yes. She's safe. Thanks to you, as much as I hate to admit it. But we still need to talk." They moved to a private office while Emma took Charlotte to another room where a doctor could check her over and where she could call her parents. Marcus could hear Charlotte's voice, still shaky, saying, "Mummy, something scary happened, but I'm okay. The guard with the red uniform kept me safe." In the office, David Chen closed the door and turned to face Marcus. "What you did was completely out of line. You disobeyed direct orders. You broke protocol. You grabbed the princess and ran without authorization, without coordination with the security team. Without getting her stabbed by a mentally ill man with a knife." Marcus interrupted. "Yes, I'm aware. That's not the point. We had the situation under control. We had protocols in place for exactly this type of scenario. You undermined the entire security operation by acting independently." Marcus met his gaze steadily. "Did you see his eyes?" "I did. I've seen eyes like that before in combat zones. That man was committed. He was going to reach her or die trying. Maybe your team would have stopped him. Probably they would have. But there was a chance, even a small one, that in the chaos he might have gotten to her. I wasn't willing to take that chance." David Chen ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. "Marcus, I understand your instincts. I respect them. But in royal protection, we can't have people making independent decisions. We have protocols for a reason. If everyone just acts on instinct, we have chaos. If everyone just follows protocols while a child gets hurt, we have failure," Marcus countered. "I'm not saying your way is wrong. I'm saying that in that specific moment, with that specific threat, my way was better." Before David could respond, his phone rang. He looked at the caller ID and his face went pale. "It's Kensington Palace. Prince William, directly," he answered with a shaky voice. "Yes, Your Royal Highness. Yes, she's completely safe. No injuries at all." "Yes, sir. I'll tell him." David hung up and looked at Marcus with an unreadable expression. "Prince William wants to speak with you personally. He's on his way back from his tour. He'll be here within 3 hours." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Being summoned to speak with the Prince of Wales was not a good sign. He was going to be disciplined, possibly discharged from royal service. His career in the Guards was likely over, but he couldn't bring himself to regret his actions. Charlotte was safe. That was all that mattered. The next 3 hours passed in a blur. Marcus gave his official statement to police. He spoke with security coordinators who documented every second of the incident. He was questioned about his decision-making process, his training, his reasoning for breaking protocol. Through it all, he could hear the news reports on televisions throughout the hospital. The story had broken almost immediately. Attack at royal hospital visit. Princess Charlotte targeted, security breach during public appearance. His phone was flooded with messages from fellow guards. From friends, from his mother, who was terrified after seeing the news. He couldn't respond to any of them while the investigation was ongoing. Finally, word came that Prince William had arrived. He had come directly from the airport, still in his traveling clothes, his face drawn with stress and fear. He went immediately to Charlotte, spending 30 minutes with her in private, before asking to speak with Marcus. Marcus was led to a conference room where Prince William waited. The prince stood by the window, his back to the door, his posture tense. When he turned around, Marcus came to attention and saluted formally. "Your Royal Highness, at ease, Guardsman Webb." William's voice was controlled, but Marcus could hear the emotion underneath it. "Sit down, please." They both sat at the conference table. For a long moment, William just looked at Marcus, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke. "I've reviewed the security footage from the corridor. I've read the preliminary reports. I've spoken with David Chen and the other security personnel." He paused. "And I've spoken with my daughter, who told me that you picked her up and ran with her, that you told her she was safe, that you stayed with her in a supply room until you were absolutely certain the threat was neutralized." Marcus nodded. "Yes, Your Highness. That's accurate. You directly disobeyed orders from your superior officer." "Yes." "Your Highness, you broke established security protocols?" "Yes." "Your Highness, you made an independent tactical decision in a high-stress situation without authorization." "Your Highness." William was quiet for another moment. His hands clasped on the table in front of him. Then he said, "You saved my daughter's life." "Right. The words hung in the air between them. "We can't know that for certain, Your Highness," Marcus said carefully. "The other security personnel might have stopped him." "Probably would have," William interrupted. "But you made absolutely certain. You removed her from the threat entirely. You prioritized her safety over protocol, over your career, over everything else." His voice cracked slightly. "As a security officer, that's questionable. As a father, I'm profoundly grateful." Marcus didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. William continued. "I'm in an impossible position right now. The security services are calling for your dismissal. They say you're unreliable, that you can't be trusted to follow orders, that you represent a liability. They have valid points." Marcus's heart sank. He had expected this, but hearing it still hurt. However, William said, and there was a slight smile at the corner of his mouth now, "My daughter told me something interesting. She said you knelt down to her level, that you explained what was happening in a way she could understand, that you asked her to be brave and then told her she was doing a good job. She said you held her hand when she was scared, and that you called her Princess Charlotte with respect, not just the asset or eagle like the security protocols require. I thought it was important that she'd feel like a person, not just a protectee, Your Highness," Marcus explained. "Exactly," William said firmly. "Do you know what the biggest challenge is in raising royal children? Teaching them that they're both special and ordinary at the same time. That they have responsibilities, but they're still just kids who deserve to feel safe and cared for." Leaned forward. "You understood that instinctively. You didn't just protect a royal asset. You protected a frightened little girl." William stood up, and Marcus immediately stood as well. Coming back to attention, "Guardsman Marcus Webb," William said formally. "On behalf of my family and the crown, I want to thank you for your service today. You displayed extraordinary courage, sound judgment under pressure, and genuine care for my daughter's well-being. Thank you, Your Highness. It was my honor. As for the disciplinary questions," William continued, "I've had discussions with the heads of security. There will be no formal punishment. However, you will be reassigned. Your instincts are too valuable to waste on standard protocol positions. I'm having you transferred to a special unit that handles higher-risk protection scenarios situations, where thinking independently is actually required." Marcus felt relief flood through him. "Your Highness, I don't know what to say. Say you'll continue to protect my family with the same dedication you showed today. Say you'll trust your instincts when it matters. And say you'll remember that behind every title, every protocol, every security designation, there's a real person who deserves protection, not because of their position, but because of their humanity." "I will, Your Highness. I promise." William extended his hand, and Marcus shook it firmly. Then William did something completely unexpected. He pulled Marcus into a brief, tight embrace. "Thank you," William whispered. "Thank you for keeping my little girl safe." When they separated, both men had tears in their eyes. After his meeting with Prince William, Marcus was told he could finally leave the hospital. He walked through the corridors in a daze, still processing everything that had happened. His career wasn't over. He had been commended, not condemned. It felt surreal. As he approached the exit, a hospital administrator stopped him. "Guardsman Webb, Princess Charlotte has asked to see you before you leave. If you're willing, that is. Her parents have approved the visit." Marcus was surprised but immediately agreed. He was led to a private family room where Charlotte sat on a sofa between her father and Emma Richardson. She looked small and tired, but when she saw Marcus, her face lit up with recognition. "It's the brave guard," she exclaimed, sitting up straighter. Marcus approached and bowed formally. "Your Royal Highness, I'm glad to see you're all right." Charlotte stood up and walked over to him with the unconscious confidence of childhood. "Papa says you're going to get a special job now. Because you were so brave." "I was just doing my duty, Princess," Charlotte said with the absolute certainty of an 8-year-old. "Emma says duty is doing what you're supposed to do. But you did more than that. You picked me up and ran really fast. That was brave, not just duty." Marcus smiled despite himself. "You're very wise for someone so young, Your Highness." Charlotte looked up at him seriously. "I was really scared. But you told me I was safe, and you meant it. I could tell you meant it. That made me less scared. I'm glad I could help." William stood and joined them. "Charlotte has something she wants to ask you, Marcus." Charlotte. The little princess looked suddenly shy, glancing at her father for encouragement before speaking. "I have to learn about brave people from my history lessons. About people who did brave things. Can I write about you? About today?" Marcus was touched beyond words. "Your Highness, I'm honored, but I'm not sure I'm the right subject for a history lesson. I'm just a guardsman." "That's the point," William interjected gently. "History isn't just about kings and queens and famous battles. It's about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when they're needed. Today, you were extraordinary. Charlotte should know that heroes aren't always famous or powerful sometimes. They're just people who make the right choice in a crucial moment." Charlotte tugged on Marcus's sleeve. "Please, I promise to spell your name right and everything." Marcus looked at this brave little girl who had held herself together during a terrifying experience, and he couldn't refuse. "I would be very honored to be part of your history lesson." "Your Highness," Charlotte beamed and threw her arms around Marcus's waist in an impulsive hug that would never have been allowed under normal royal protocol. But William just smiled and didn't intervene. Some moments were more important than protocol. When Charlotte stepped back, she said seriously, "When I'm queen someday, I'm going to remember what you did. I'm going to remember that the best people are the ones who keep others safe. Even when it's hard or scary, or when they might get in trouble. It's a very good thing to remember." "Your Highness," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion, as Marcus prepared to finally leave. William walked with him to the door. "One more thing," the prince said quietly. "Catherine wants to meet you as well, once she's recovered. She wants to thank you personally. And frankly, I think she wants to see for herself that the man who protected our daughter is someone we can trust." "I'd be honored to meet the Princess of Wales." "Your Highness, good. We'll arrange something soon. And Marcus, when you meet her, you can drop the formal tone a bit. My wife isn't big on excessive protocol, especially with people who've earned our trust and gratitude." Over the next few days, Marcus found himself at the center of a media storm he hadn't expected. The story had captured public imagination. Hero guard saves princess, defies orders to protect Charlotte. Military training saves royal life. His photograph was on the front page of every newspaper. Video footage from security cameras had been released heavily edited to protect. Operational details, showing Marcus running with Charlotte in his arms, his red tunic flying behind him like a cape. Social media exploded with support. People called him a hero, a true guardian, the embodiment of what royal protection should be. But there were critics too, people who said he had been reckless, that he had undermined security protocols. He had gotten lucky rather than being smart. Marcus tried to ignore all of it. He reported to his new assignment a specialized protection unit that handled higher-risk scenarios and threw himself into training. His new commander, Colonel Sarah Mitchell, was a no-nonsense woman with 30 years of security experience. "Guardsman Webb," she said when he reported for duty, "you've become famous. That's going to be both an asset and a liability in this unit. Some people will trust you more because of what happened. Others will be watching you, waiting for you to make a mistake. How do you plan to handle that?" "By doing my job to the best of my ability, ma'am." "Same as always." Colonel Mitchell smiled slightly. "Good answer. But let me be clear about something. In this unit, your instincts are valued. We need people who can think independently in crisis situations. But that doesn't mean you're a lone wolf. You still need to work within a team structure. You still need to communicate. The goal is to combine good instincts with good coordination. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am. Understood." "Excellent. Now, let's see if you're as good as everyone says you are." The training was intense scenario. After scenario testing his decision-making under pressure, his ability to balance protocol with practical necessity, his coordination with team members. Marcus discovered that his combat experience translated well to this new role. He had learned in war zones to trust his team while also trusting his gut, and that balance served him well now. 3 weeks after the hospital incident, Marcus received an invitation to Kensington Palace for a private lunch with Prince William and Princess Catherine. The invitation was informal by royal standards. But Marcus still felt nervous as he arrived at the palace gates. He was led through elegant corridors to a private dining room that felt surprisingly cozy. Despite its grandeur, William was already there, dressed casually in slacks and a sweater. A moment later, Catherine entered, and Marcus understood immediately why she was so beloved by the public. Her smile was genuine and warm as she approached him. "Guardsman Webb, I'm so pleased to finally meet you," she said, extending her hand. "I'm sorry it's taken a few weeks. I've been recovering from a rather stubborn illness, Your Royal Highness. The pleasure is entirely mine. And please, I hope you're feeling better." "Much better. Thank you." "And please, in private like this, Catherine is fine." They sat down to lunch, surprisingly simple food, sandwiches and salad. Nothing fancy. Catherine had clearly wanted this to feel like a conversation between people, not a formal royal audience. "I've wanted to thank you personally for what you did for Charlotte," Catherine began, her eyes filling with tears. "As a mother, the thought of what might have happened if you hadn't acted so quickly, it's unbearable. You saved my daughter, Marcus. There are no words adequate to express my gratitude. Your Royal Highness Gathia and I was simply in the right place at the right time." "No," William interjected. "You made the right choice at the right time. There's a difference. Other people were in the same place. They made different choices. Yours saved Charlotte." Catherine leaned forward slightly. "Charlotte has talked about you every day since the incident. She's written her history report about you, complete with illustrations she drew herself. She calls you the brave guard in red and has been asking when she'll see you again." Marcus was surprised. "I had no idea I made such an impression, Your Royal Highness." "You did more than make an impression," Catherine continued. "You showed her what real courage looks like. Not the fairy tale version where knights slay dragons, but the real version, where ordinary people do extraordinary things because it's the right thing to do." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "We're raising our children to understand duty and service, but we also want them to understand that rules exist to serve people, not the other way around. You demonstrated that perfectly." William nodded in agreement. "The security services have been debating your actions for weeks. Half of them say you're a maverick who can't be trusted. The other half say you're exactly the kind of person they need. Catherine and I fall firmly in the latter camp." "We have something we'd like to propose," Catherine said. "It's unusual, and we'll understand completely if you decline. But Charlotte would like you to be present at some of her future public engagements. Not as her primary security. David Chen and his team will continue in that role, but as an additional protective presence. Someone she knows and trusts." Marcus was stunned. "Your Royal Highnesses, I'm honored, but wouldn't that be seen as favoritism? As undermining the existing security structure?" "We've discussed it extensively with the security heads," William explained. "They're actually supportive. Having someone Charlotte trusts makes her calmer during public appearances, which actually makes everyone's job easier. And frankly, your presence sends a message that we value people who think independently, who prioritize safety over politics." "There's another reason," Catherine added softly. "Charlotte has had nightmares since the incident. Not every night, but several times a week. She dreams about the man with the knife, about being in danger. But she also dreams about you, about feeling safe, about being protected. Having you present occasionally, where she can see you, might help her feel more secure as she processes what happened." Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. But it was a weight he was willing to carry. "If you believe my presence would help Princess Charlotte, then I would be honored to serve in that capacity." Catherine's smile was radiant with relief. "Thank you, Marcus. Truly. You have no idea what peace of mind that gives us." They finished their lunch discussing logistics, boundaries, and expectations. Marcus would remain in his specialized unit, but would be available for specific events where Charlotte was present. It was an unusual arrangement, but then again the circumstances that had created it were unusual too. As Marcus prepared to leave, Catherine stopped him. "There's one more thing. Charlotte asked if she could see you before you go. She's in the garden with her brothers. Would you mind terribly?" "Not at all, Your Royal Highness." Catherine led him through the palace to a private garden where Charlotte was playing with George and Louis. When she saw Marcus, she immediately ran over, her face lighting up with joy. "You came. You really came." She grabbed his hand unselfconsciously. "I have to show you something." She pulled him over to a small table where papers were spread out, her history report. Marcus read it with growing emotion. Charlotte had written about his bravery, but also about how he had made her feel safe, how he had talked to her like a person, how he had stayed with her until the danger was over. At the bottom of the report, she had drawn a picture. It showed a tall figure in a red uniform holding the hand of a small girl in a blue coat. Above them, she had written in careful letters, "Real heroes keep people safe." "It's beautiful, Princess Charlotte," Marcus said sincerely. "I'm very honored." "My teacher gave me top marks," Charlotte said proudly. "And she said I should always remember that being brave means doing the right thing, even when you're scared. Just like you did." George, who had been watching from a distance, approached shyly. "Are you really the guard who saved our sister?" "I helped keep her safe, yes," Marcus replied carefully. "That was very brave," George said seriously. At 10 years old, he was already showing signs of the thoughtful, responsible person he would become. "Thank you for protecting her." Even little Louis, just 6 years old, piped up. "Can you teach me to be brave like you?" Marcus knelt down to Louis's level. "Being brave isn't about being big or strong, Prince Louis. It's about caring for other people and doing what's right to help them. You can be brave right now, today, by being kind to your brother and sister and standing up for people who need help." Louis considered this seriously, then nodded. "I can do that." Catherine watched this interaction with visible emotion. Later, as she walked Marcus back to the palace entrance, she said quietly, "You're wonderful with them. You treat them like real children, not just royal obligations. That's rarer than you might think. They are real children, Your Royal Highness. That's what matters most." "Catherine," she reminded him gently, "at least when we're in private like this. And yes, they are real children. Our most important job as parents is making sure they never forget that, despite all the protocol and expectations surrounding them." As Marcus left Kensington Palace that day, he felt a profound sense of purpose. His job wasn't just about following orders or maintaining security perimeters. It was about protecting real people with fears and hopes and dreams. People who happened to have extraordinary responsibilities, but were still fundamentally human. The partnership between Marcus and the royal family would continue for years to come, built on a foundation of trust earned in a moment of crisis. And Charlotte would never forget the guard in the red uniform who had picked her up and run, who had made her feel safe when the world suddenly became frightening, who had shown her that true courage meant putting others first, even at personal cost. It was a lesson that would shape her throughout her life, influencing the kind of princess and eventually queen she would become. For months after the incident, Richard Paxton's trial began at the Old Bailey. The case had attracted massive media attention. An attack on a member of the royal family was rare, and the circumstances were both frightening and fascinating to the public. Marcus had been subpoenaed to testify. He had been dreading it for weeks, reliving that day, explaining his decisions under oath, potentially being cross-examined by defense attorneys, who might try to paint him as reckless or his actions as unnecessary, and none of it appealed to him. The morning of his testimony, Marcus arrived at the courthouse in his dress uniform. He had been advised that appearing in uniform would reinforce his credibility as a professional security officer rather than an impulsive individual. The courtroom was packed with journalists, security experts, and members of the public who had been lucky enough to get seats. The judge, a stern woman named Justice Helena Bradshaw, maintained strict order as proceedings began. Richard Paxton sat in the dock, looking smaller and more confused than he had in the hospital corridor. He had been on medication for months now, and the delusions that had driven him to attack had diminished. He looked at Marcus with no recognition, no memory of the man who had carried Charlotte away from him. The prosecution attorney, a sharp man named Jonathan Mills, called Marcus to the stand. After the preliminary questions establishing his identity and position, Mills got to the heart of the matter. Guardsman Webb. Can you describe what you observed when Richard Paxton emerged from the stairwell? Marcus took a deep breath and began. He moved with purpose and speed. His eyes were locked onto Princess Charlotte immediately, with absolute focus. In my military experience, that kind of single-minded determination indicates someone who is committed to a course of action and will not be deterred easily. What made you decide to remove Princess Charlotte from the scene rather than assist in subduing Mr. Paxton? Risk assessment, sir. There were already multiple security personnel moving to intercept Mr. Paxton. My presence wouldn't significantly improve the odds of subduing him. But removing the target, Princess Charlotte, from the immediate area would eliminate any possibility of harm. Even if the interception failed, or if Mr. Paxton had backup we weren't aware of. You disobeyed direct orders from your superior officer to do this? Yes, sir, I did. Why? Marcus chose his words carefully. In that moment, I had to decide what my primary duty was: following the command structure or protecting Princess Charlotte. I chose protection. I stand by that decision. The defense attorney, a woman named Sarah Chen, rose for cross-examination. Guardsman Webb, isn't it true that you have a history of, shall we say, independent action? You've been noted in your military records as someone who occasionally acts without authorization. I've been commended multiple times for initiative in combat situations, Marcus replied evenly. In dynamic, dangerous environments, the ability to make rapid decisions is valuable. Or it's insubordination dressed up as heroism, Chen suggested. Tell me, did you consider the possibility that by grabbing Princess Charlotte and running, you might actually have put her in more danger? What if there had been a secondary attacker positioned elsewhere? What if your route had been compromised? I assessed those risks and determined they were less significant than the immediate threat in front of us. Based on what? Your instinct? Your feeling? Chen pressed. These were life and death decisions affecting a member of the royal family. Made by one man acting alone, ignoring established protocols that exist for a reason. Marcus remained calm. The protocols are excellent for most situations, but they're also rigid. In this specific circumstance, with this specific threat, flexibility was more valuable than rigidity. A man with a knife was 20 feet from an 8-year-old child. I had seconds to decide. I chose to remove her from danger. My client was mentally ill, Chen said, her tone sharp. He needed help, not violence. If you had simply allowed the other security personnel to handle him as planned, perhaps the situation could have been resolved without the traumatic experience of being grabbed and carried away that Princess Charlotte endured. Marcus felt anger rising, but kept it controlled. Your client was armed and fixated on harming a child. Princess Charlotte's temporary discomfort from being carried to safety is infinitely preferable to the alternative. The questioning continued for another hour, with Chen trying to paint Marcus as a loose cannon and Mills reinforcing his quick thinking and protective instincts. Finally, Marcus was dismissed from the stand. As he left the courtroom, he was stopped by a court liaison. Guardsman Webb, there's someone who'd like to speak with you. Marcus was led to a private room where, to his surprise, he found David Chen, waiting his superior officer from the day of the incident. They hadn't spoken much since that day, their relationship strained by the events and Marcus's subsequent reassignment. David, Marcus said cautiously, I didn't expect to see you here. I testified yesterday, David replied. About our security procedures, the timeline of events, my assessment of the threat level. He paused, looking uncomfortable. I need to say something to you, and I should have said it months ago. Marcus waited. You were right, David said simply. I've replayed that day 1,000 times in my head. I followed protocol perfectly. I did everything by the book. And if you hadn't been there, if you hadn't broken protocol, there's a real chance that child would have been hurt or worse. My rigid adherence to rules almost cost a little girl her life. David, you can't think like that. You were doing your job correctly. Correctly, but not effectively, David interrupted. There's a difference. I've been in security for 15 years, Marcus. I've run hundreds of protection details. Nothing ever went wrong because I followed the rules perfectly. But you know what? Nothing ever went right in an unexpected way either. I never had to make a real decision, a hard decision. You did, and you made the right one. Marcus didn't know what to say. David continued, I fought against your commendation. I argued that you should be disciplined. I told my superiors that letting you off without punishment would undermine security protocols across the board. I was wrong about all of it. You deserve to be recognized, not punished. And I'm sorry I didn't see that sooner. Marcus extended his hand. We were both trying to protect her, David, just in different ways. No apology necessary. David shook his hand firmly. Maybe not necessary, but deserved. And for what it's worth, I've changed how I train new security personnel now. I still teach protocols, they're important, but I also teach judgment. Flexibility, the ability to recognize when the rules don't fit the situation. I use what you did as a case study. You've actually improved royal security just by trusting your instincts that day. The trial continued for another week. Medical experts testified about Richard Paxton's mental state, his history of untreated illness, his deteriorating grip on reality. The defense argued for leniency based on diminished capacity. The prosecution argued for public safety and the severity of threatening a child. In the end, Richard Paxton was found guilty but sentenced to an indefinite stay in a secure psychiatric facility rather than prison. The judge noted that while his actions were serious and could have been tragic, his mental illness was a significant factor. He would receive treatment and would be released only when medical professionals determined he was no longer a danger. After the verdict, Marcus was contacted by William and Catherine's office. They wanted to brief him on the outcome and to discuss how to explain the events to Charlotte, who had been following the trial as much as her parents allowed. Marcus met with them at Kensington Palace again, this time in Catherine's private sitting room. Charlotte was at school, giving them time to talk openly. How are you holding up? Catherine asked with genuine concern. Testifying can't have been easy. It was challenging, Marcus admitted. Having my decisions questioned, being cross-examined about split-second choices I made months ago, but I stand by everything I did. As you should, William said firmly. The verdict was appropriate, I think. The man needs help, not punishment. But he also needs to be somewhere he can't hurt anyone. Charlotte has been asking questions, Catherine said. She's old enough to understand that the man who scared her was sick, not evil. But she's also struggling with feeling safe in public now. She's been more anxious before appearances, more clingy. That's natural, Marcus said. She experienced real danger. That changes how you see the world. We were hoping, William said, that you might speak with her. You were there. You kept her safe. She trusts you. Maybe hearing from you that it's okay to be nervous, that being brave doesn't mean not being scared, maybe that would help? Of course, Marcus agreed immediately. Whatever she needs. An hour later, Charlotte arrived home from school, still in her uniform. When she saw Marcus waiting in the sitting room, she smiled, but less exuberantly than before. The sparkle in her eyes had dimmed somewhat. Hello, Guardsman Webb, she said politely, almost formally. Hello, Princess Charlotte. Your parents thought we might talk for a bit, if you're comfortable with that. Charlotte nodded and sat down across from him. Her posture perfect but tense. Marcus decided to be direct. I heard you've been worried about going to public events. Is that true? Charlotte nodded slowly. What if it happens again? What if someone else wants to hurt me? That's a very reasonable fear, Marcus said seriously. What happened to you was scary. It's okay to feel nervous about it happening again. But I'm supposed to be brave, Charlotte said, her voice small. I'm supposed to do my duty and go to events and meet people. Mummy and Papa do it all the time. Can I tell you a secret? Marcus leaned forward. Your mummy and Papa get nervous too. So do I every time I'm on a protection detail. There's a part of me that's scared something will go wrong. Being brave doesn't mean you're never afraid. It means you do what needs to be done, even when you're afraid. Charlotte looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. You get scared? Even though you're a soldier? Especially because I'm a soldier. I've seen danger. I know what can happen. That knowledge makes me cautious, makes me careful, but it doesn't stop me from doing my job. The fear makes me better at protecting people, actually, because I never take safety for granted. So it's okay that I'm scared? It's completely okay. What's not okay is letting the fear stop you from living your life. That man who scared you, he was sick and confused, and now he's somewhere getting help. The chances of something like that happening again are very, very small. And even if something did happen, there are always people like me, like your security team, whose entire job is keeping you safe. Charlotte was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she asked, "Will you be there? At my next public event?" "Mummy and Papa said you might come to some of them. If you want me there, I'll be there." "I do want you there," Charlotte said firmly, some of her old confidence returning. "Because when you're there, I know I'm safe." "You proved it." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Then I'll be there, Princess Charlotte. I promise." 2 years had passed since the hospital incident. Princess Charlotte was now 10 years old, more confident and mature, though still carrying the memory of that frightening day. She had made dozens of public appearances since then, and true to his promise, Marcus had been present at many of them. Their relationship had evolved into something unique in royal protection, a bond built on trust, mutual respect that went beyond typical security arrangements. Charlotte no longer needed Marcus's constant presence to feel safe, but she appreciated when he was there, and her parents had come to value his steady, thoughtful approach to protection. On a bright morning in May 2026, Charlotte was scheduled to return to the same hospital where the incident had occurred. It was a deliberate choice by William and Catherine, made in consultation with Charlotte herself. The hospital had invited her to open a new children's mental health wing, a facility partly funded by royal patronage and designed to help young people struggling with psychological challenges. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Charlotte would return to the place where she had faced danger, this time to promote help and healing for others. Marcus was part of the security detail, wearing his red ceremonial uniform. As they drove to the hospital, he sat in the security vehicle behind Charlotte's car. Watching the streets pass by and remembering that day 2 years earlier, David Chen, who had remained head of Charlotte's primary security team, spoke over the radio. "All units were approaching the venue. Perimeter is secure. No unusual activity reported?" "Acknowledged," Marcus replied, then added, "How's Eagle doing?" There was a pause. Then Charlotte's voice came on the radio. She had her own secured device now for these events. "Eagle is doing fine, thank you for asking, Guardsman Webb. Though I wish you'd all stop calling me Eagle. It makes me sound like a bird."
"I'll like it."
Marcus smiled. "What would you prefer, Your Royal Highness?" "I don't know. Something less likely to fly away?" Even David Chen chuckled at that. The moment of levity helped ease the underlying tension everyone felt about returning to this location when they arrived at the hospital. A substantial crowd had gathered, much larger than 2 years ago. Security was significantly enhanced, with both uniformed and plainclothes officers positioned throughout the area. But the atmosphere was celebratory, not tense. People had come to see a princess, yes, but also to celebrate the opening of a facility that would help their community. Charlotte stepped out of the car with practiced grace, waving to the crowd. She wore a yellow dress that seemed to embody hope and new beginnings. As she walked toward the entrance, Marcus fell into position beside her, not hovering. It's not obvious, but present and watchful. The hospital director greeted her warmly. "Your Royal Highness, we're so honored you chose to return here for this important opening. I know it must be difficult." Charlotte smiled with maturity beyond her years. "It's important to face difficult things, don't you think? And this facility will help so many people. That's more important than my discomfort." As they toured the new mental health wing, Charlotte asked thoughtful questions about the treatment programs, the support offered to families, the training of the staff. She had clearly prepared thoroughly, understanding that her role wasn't just ceremonial, it was to draw attention to an important cause. In one room, she met with a group of teenagers who were participating in an early intervention program for mental health challenges. One girl, about 16, asked nervously, "Your Royal Highness, is it true that you were attacked here 2 years ago?" The adults in the room tensed, but Charlotte handled the question with remarkable composure. "Yes, that's true. A man who was very sick and not getting the treatment he needed came here and scared me badly. It was frightening, and I had nightmares about it for a long time. How did you get over it? The girl asked. I'm not sure I'm completely over it, Charlotte admitted honestly. But I learned that being scared is normal. What matters is not letting fear control your life. And I learned that getting help, talking to people, having support makes everything better. That's why facilities like this one are so important. They help people before they reach a crisis point. Marcus, standing near the doorway, was struck by Charlotte's growth. The frightened 8-year-old he had carried to safety had become a thoughtful young woman who could discuss her trauma with grace and use it to help others. After the tour, Charlotte unveiled a plaque commemorating the opening of the new wing. In her speech, she surprised everyone by going off script. 2 years ago, I came to this hospital for what should have been a simple visit, she began. Instead, I experienced something terrifying that changed how I see the world. But I also experienced something else that DI experienced, the dedication of people who protect others, who put themselves at risk to keep people safe. She turned to look directly at Marcus, who stood in his red uniform at the side of the stage. Guardsman Marcus Webb was part of my security detail that day. When danger appeared, he didn't follow the expected procedures. Instead, he made a choice, a brave choice, to get me to safety as quickly as possible. He picked me up and ran with me, stayed with me until the danger was over, and made me feel safe when I was terrified. The crowd applauded, and Marcus felt his face flush with embarrassment and pride. Charlotte continued, the man who scared me that day was suffering from mental illness. He wasn't evil. He was sick. And if facilities like this one had been available to him, if he had gotten help before his illness became so severe, maybe that day would have ended differently for everyone. That's why this wing matters. It's not just about treating illness, it's about preventing crisis, about giving people help before they reach their breaking point. When the ceremony concluded, Charlotte insisted on meeting with the hospital staff privately, the doctors, nurses, and security personnel who had been there 2 years earlier. It was her way of closing the circle, of acknowledging that the incident had affected everyone, not just her. As the day wound down and they prepared to leave, Charlotte pulled Marcus aside. Can we go somewhere? Just for a moment. With David Chen's approval and additional security in place, Marcus walked with Charlotte to the third-floor corridor where everything had happened 2 years earlier. It looked different, now fresh paint, new flooring, better lighting. But the layout was the same. Charlotte stood in the spot where she had been standing when Richard Paxton emerged from the stairwell. She was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus waited patiently, letting her process whatever she needed to process. I used to have nightmares about this hallway, Charlotte said softly. In my dreams, I'd be standing right here and he'd come through that door and I'd be frozen. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't do anything. Just frozen. That's a common trauma response, Marcus said gently. Our minds replay frightening events, trying to make sense of them. But the dreams changed, Charlotte continued. After a while, in my dreams, I wasn't frozen anymore. I could move. And you'd be there, just like you were that day, and you'd pick me up, and I'd be safe. The dreams became less scary because I remembered that I wasn't alone that day. Someone protected me. She turned to look at Marcus directly. I asked to come back here today because I needed to prove to myself that I'm not afraid anymore. That this is just a hallway in a hospital, not a place of terror. And I wanted you here because you helped me feel safe then. And you help me feel safe now. Marcus knelt down, though at 10 years old. Charlotte was tall enough that the gesture wasn't as dramatic as it had been 2 years earlier. Princess Charlotte, you are one of the bravest people I've ever met. Coming back here, facing your fear, using your experience to help others, that's real courage. I'm honored to be part of your journey. Charlotte surprised him by pulling him into a hug. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for being there. Thank you for teaching me that being scared is okay, but being paralyzed by fear is not. When they returned to the entrance, William and Catherine were waiting. They had been informed about Charlotte's request to visit the corridor and had approved it. Understanding that their daughter needed this closure, "How do you feel?" Catherine asked her daughter gently. "Better," Charlotte said with a smile. I faced the place that scared me, and it didn't scare me anymore. I'm ready to go home now. As they drove back to Kensington Palace, David Chen spoke to Marcus over the private channel. You know, I've been doing this job for a long time. I've protected a lot of people. But I've never seen a relationship quite like the one you have with Princess Charlotte. It's not just professional, it's genuinely caring. That's rare. She's an extraordinary person, Marcus replied. She deserves extraordinary protection. She has it. Because of people like you who understand that protection isn't just about physical safety. It's about emotional safety too. It's about creating an environment where she can be brave and face her fears and grow into the person she's meant to be. Later that evening, Marcus received a call from Prince William. Marcus, Catherine and I wanted to thank you for today. For being there, for supporting Charlotte as she faced something difficult, for being the steady presence she needed. It was my honor. Your Royal Highness, we've been thinking, William continued, about the future. Charlotte has several years before she takes on more substantial royal duties. But when she does, we'd like you to be part of her permanent security detail. Not just occasional appearances, but a formal position as one of her primary protection officers.
Marcus
Was stunned. Your Royal Highness, I don't know what to say. Say yes, William said with a smile in his voice. Charlotte trusts you. We trust you. And frankly, you've earned the position 100 times over. Then yes. Absolutely yes. Excellent. We'll work out the details in the coming months. For now, just know that you've become part of our family in a very real way. Not as staff, not as just security, but as someone who genuinely cares about our daughter's well-being. That means more to us than you could possibly know. After the call ended, Marcus sat in his small flat, processing the day and the offer. He thought about that moment 2 years earlier, when he had made a split-second decision to grab a frightened little girl and run. That decision had changed his life in ways he never could have anticipated. He had defied orders, broken protocol, and risked his career. But he had saved a child. And in doing so, he had found his true calling, not just protecting bodies, but protecting spirits, helping a young princess grow up feeling safe enough to be brave, secure enough to face her fears, confident enough to use her position to help others. Marcus looked at a photograph on his desk, a candid shot from today's event showing Charlotte laughing at something he had said. Her face free of fear or anxiety, just a happy 10-year-old girl enjoying a moment of joy. That image, more than any medal or commendation, represented what his job was really about. The red uniform he wore wasn't just ceremonial. It was a symbol of commitment, of sacrifice, of the willingness to put others first, no matter the cost. 2 years ago, he had lived up to that symbol in a moment of crisis. And every day since, he continued to honor it by being present, being vigilant, and being someone that a princess who was also just a girl could trust, absolutely. The story that had begun with danger and defiance had become a story of trust, growth, and the profound impact one person could have by simply making the right choice in a crucial moment. And for Marcus Webb, there was no greater honor than knowing he had made a real difference in the life of someone who would one day help lead a nation. The Guard in Red had done more than save a princess. He had helped shape a future queen,